this nice cold night. I am going to just start by saying welcome to the Demystifying AI. It's going to by Dr. Amy Collier, who is shutting the door because she's a professor and she knows that there's a lot of noise in the hallways. I'm Linda Graff. I'm a member of AAUW. Our speaker series is co-sponsored by the Middlebury branch of the American Association of University Women and the Ilsley Public Library, which we all know is under construction at the moment, and so we are meeting here. So thank you to Middlebury College, and it made it easy for Amy because she could just walk here from her office. For those of you that don't know, and I'm speaking especially to Amy on this one, AAUW is a nonprofit organization founded in 1881 with a membership of over 170,000. Its mission is to advance gender equality for women and girls in education, the workplace, and women's rights through research, education, and advocacy.
We need to get busy.
Yeah. We're working on it.
The Middlebury branch was founded over 100 years ago, so we've been around for quite some time. We meet once a month from September through May, support a group of African women who are Middlebury College students, and have sponsored our speaker series open to the public. So welcome to everyone who's here. It is one of the, AAUW is one of the world's largest sources of funding for graduate student women, and we provide over $6 million in funding for fellowships and grants to 285 awardees in the 23-24 academic year. So it's pretty impressive growth.
It's good. Yeah.
For more information about AAUW, you can go to aauw.org. And for questions for any local activities, you can see me or any of the people who have one of these beautiful things on tonight in the room. So our format tonight is that we're going to give Amy a chance to speak, and then it's going to be followed by questions, and she's going to hopefully answer them all. And we'll end about 8:15. We're pleased to have Amy with us tonight. She provides strategic vision and leadership to position Middlebury as a leading innovator in creating and sustaining a global learning community through the effective use of digital pedagogies and technologies. It's a mouthful. So what does that mean? She helps the provost and the deans to oversee Middlebury's programs. She identifies and pursues ways for Middlebury to create online and hybrid courses and programs that meets the highest standard of academic integrity and connects diverse Middlebury programs with each other to enrich the student learning. And I should also mention that she also is the local jazzercise instructor. Tonight she's going to speak to us about the fact that there is a lot of hype surrounding generative AI and AI. How do we cut through that noise to take a curious but critical look at those technologies that are being used and what their impacts might be? How do we decide our own approach to engaging with these technologies? And in this presentation, she will provide some ideas, framing to help us think through these and other questions, and hopefully let us not be too scared. And before I put it over to her, I'm just going to mention next month, March 18th, at 7 o'clock, we're going to be meeting at Town Hall Theater. They're going to get a view of the new wing and a nice little tour by Lisa Mitchell, who's also going to talk about the arts in Middlebury. So,
Oh, great.
meanwhile, thank you and welcome to Amy.
Let me do a little sound check. Are we good on sound? Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you all for inviting me to be here. This is like one of the hardest topics to talk about because it's terrible, and also ever-changing. It's changing a lot. It's changing daily. And so I approach you with trepidation. I approach you with humility. And I approach you with, I will say, a mutual curiosity. Hopefully tonight we're approaching AI with a sense of curiosity and wonder about what these technologies mean for us. What do they mean for our world and the things we care about? And what are maybe some things that we want to reconsider when it comes to AI? Bless you. As Lynn said, my role here at Middlebury, all those many words, really mean that my job here is to help Middlebury figure out how to best use digital technologies as part of the educational experience of Middlebury students. Whether those are Middlebury students here at the college or our graduate professional programs out of the Institute, our language schools, we have a number of academic offerings. And with digital technologies playing a role in learning now, part of my job is to help us figure out what are the right strategies for Middlebury to take in terms of digital technologies. So of course, AI enters that picture quite naturally because here comes AI, and oh my gosh, it has all these potential implications for the classroom and for education and many other systems beyond that. And so my work over the last couple of years since generative AI really hit the stage is to figure out what do we do about this? How do we think about this? How do we handle it? So as I said, I approach it with a lot of curiosity and a lot of openness to learning. And so hopefully we'll do that tonight together and just see where it takes us. All right? All right. So as I said, a little bit of trepidation when it comes to talking about AI. So I kind of just go, where do I even start? What do I even talk about? So I wanted to mention, first of all, that AI and generative AI might feel something that's very other to you. It might feel distant from you. You may not use it. It may not feel like something that's a big part of your lives. And at the same time, AI and generative AI are really making inroads into all aspects of our lives, whether we realize it or not. So you may think, well, I don't really have a digital life, so to speak, but you do, right? You use search. A lot of the technologies that intersect with your daily life, whether you're using them or somebody around you is using them, those technologies have an impact on your life. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to pull those apart and say, oh, that's over there, AI is over there, it's separate from me and it doesn't really impact me. It's just not really the case. It's very difficult to pull these things apart and wall them off from our day-to-day lives. So what I want to talk to you about a little bit today is what does that mean then for us? How do we think about that? The other kind of issue with AI and generative AI is there's a lot of hype about it. If you watch TV, if you read the news, it's everywhere. And by and large, the hype is, woo! AI is going to change everything for the better. Woo! Right?
No, that's awesome.
But that's a lot of the stories that we see, right? That's a lot of the hype that we experience in the news and in commercials. I see a ton of commercials these days about it. It's weird. So, that hype is a problem for us if we really want to engage with AI in a critical way, because it obscures some of those concerns that we might have about AI. But there's also a lot of doomerism too, right? There's a lot of kind of, oh no, this will bring about the end of the world, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, right? I feel that way most of the time, to be honest, but setting that aside, one of the challenges with hype and doomerism is that it often kind of keeps us from really engaging with the issues of these technologies. And so what I want to encourage us to do is to think about, to kind of separate ourselves out a little bit from the hype and the doomerism that typically comes with these technologies, and try to think about the tools and their impacts. What are the impacts that these technologies are having on our world, and how do we make decisions in that landscape? And I'll say, with AI, a lot of what AI is trying to do is automate decisions for us or around us. And so it may feel sometimes like we don't have a lot of agency to make decisions about these tools. And so setting aside that hype and that doomerism a little bit and saying, where do we have agency? What can we do? What do we want to maybe not to do? That's kind of part of what I want to encourage us to do today. So my goal is to support curiosity, it's to support learning, it's to support reflection, criticality, and thoughtful decision making, okay? Yes?
Could you distinguish between AI and generative?
I sure will. How about the next slide?
Okay. I wasn't paid for that.
No, you're great. That was perfect. So let's talk about what we're talking about, because I will say one of the things that you'll notice is with AI being in the news and in commercials and in stories everywhere, one of the challenges is the word AI gets used for a lot of things. Right? It gets used. In fact, I saw a funny little graphic today that was like, back in 2021, we called this machine learning, and now we just call it AI. Back in 2021, we called this blah, 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 and now we just call it AI. We use AI as this really broad term that actually doesn't mean very much, right? So AI as a term itself is very broad, and it encompasses a diverse set of tools and processes and goals and automations. So that is a term actually not super helpful. Instead, what I like to do is pull apart a few different functions or ways AI gets used. And I'm borrowing this framework from an excellent book I highly recommend. It's called AI Snake Oil. Okay. The two authors of this book, they have this particular framework for understanding AI. Now, there are other ways to think about definitions of AI. This is just one I particularly like, because it focuses a little bit more on what is the AI trying to do? What is it trying to automate, right? So predictive AI, which is a lot of the AI you actually hear about in like commercials and stuff, like what's that, Salesforce AI, right? Or a lot of workplace AI. That's really a predictive AI is what that is. That is trying to use deep learning, so techniques, processes, technologies that learn from the information that they have without human interference, although sometimes humans are providing feedback, but they're learning from information to predict outcomes to support or supplant human decision making. I'll give you an example here in a moment, okay? Generative AI is AI that primarily is intended to create information, create content. That can be anything from text, audio, video, analyses, and recently it's some of the functionalities have grown into like analyses, reasoning patterns, and it really is trying to kind of create as if a human would. Again, so we're trying to think of what is this trying to automate? It's trying to automate the creation of information and the human reasoning that sometimes goes into that. And then here's a new term probably for most of us in the room, agentic AI, fairly recent development. This is AI that is really kind of teaching itself and directing itself. So very little human interaction. The human might kind of tell it what the agent should do, and then the agent goes off and does it on its own. Okay? So agentic AI is really trying to automate workflows with minimal human interaction in the process. All right? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these, what they might look like to you as an example. But one of the things you might consider asking is, like I said, anytime you hear a story about AI, or you read something in the New York Times, or you see a commercial, a great question to ask is, what is this AI automating? What is it purporting to automate? That will help you, because that's really about the function of the AI, not all the technology behind it, not all the weird terms that we use like deep learning and machine learning and algorithms and all that stuff. Like, set that aside, because that changes quickly, a lot. And instead say, what is this AI trying to automate? Okay? So I think that's a helpful framing. These differences, these different kinds of definitions of AI may not matter, but I think they actually help us a little bit in assessing AI in our lives. So, do these distinctions matter? Maybe, sometimes. But here's a way it might help you think about it. You encounter predictive AI on a daily basis when your health insurance provider determines what kind of coverage you are going to get based on some kind of diagnosis you received. Many, if not all, insurance companies at this point use predictive AI to determine that. If you remember that story about the UHC CEO who was murdered in New York City?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that was a young individual who was reacting, at least according to his manifesto, to the fact that he had received less coverage than he thought he should because of the AI-related decision-making, right? So it was a decision-making process, determining what kind of coverage this human received. That was what the AI automated. So that's predictive AI. Make sense? That's a clear example. Generative AI, you may not use it, right, to generate stuff, and that's cool. But generative AI might show up if you go to a retail website and you go to buy something, and a little bot shows up. You know, you've seen those little pop-ups, they go, "Hi, can I help you today?" Right? That's not a human, generally. That's actually a chatbot. And the chatbot is generally a generative AI tool that is responding to your prompts and trying to pull from its databases to respond and give you the information you need. So that's generative AI. And then agentic AI, you might think of as a car that's a self-driving car, right? You get into a self-driving car or a car that has self-driving features. That technology is trying to make decisions on your behalf, right? And remove you from some of the workflows associated with driving, in this case, to automate the driving process. All right? So those distinctions may or may not be helpful. I find them a little bit helpful because one of the things that this helps us to do is to say, okay, if that's what it's automating, how well is it doing that? And what is it replacing? right? So it does kind of start to help us ask some questions about these technologies and how they show up in our lives. I will also say that though these distinctions I find helpful, these technologies are often becoming more and more integrated with each other. So it is sometimes hard to actually look at an AI technology and be able to say what it is, because it might be many AI functions. It might be a generative AI tool with an agentic background, right? Or vice versa, right? So sometimes those distinctions aren't super helpful. I tend to find them helpful just in asking the questions like, what is it trying to automate? These tools are also becoming more and more embedded in everyday things, right? So if you use an email client to write and send emails, many of your email clients at this point have AI built into them, right? You go to write an email, it says, let me help you write that, right? That's an AI, right? So again, these are becoming more and more embedded into our daily lives and becoming more and more sophisticated. All right. Ooh, okay, that cut off. I will read that. I will read all of this to you. So one of the things I like to do is to try to kind of bring some 10 things you should know about generative AI. So generative AI, I'm going to focus in on that today because, as I said, there are lots of different kinds of AI. We could talk about, I could be here for hours talking to you about all the different kinds of AI. But I want to focus on generative AI specifically because it's the one that probably hits the news most often. It's the one that intersects with my world the most. It's the one I have the most experience with. So I'm going to focus on that today and really give us a chance to talk through some of the implications of it. And you'll actually get to see some of this in demo. I'm going to show you some stuff too. Is that cool? Okay. All right, so I wanted to share a couple things I think is important to know about generative AI. So generative AI uses massive data sets, much of which is collected from the internet. Yes, that internet. Okay. And web services. So if you interact with a website, the information that you're putting into a website is often pulled into that data, right? So even if you've never used a generative AI tool, I actually say this later, your data's in there, right? Some aspect of your data is in these tools, right? So they use tons of data from the internet to generate responses to questions or prompts. A lot of the data that's in there is copyrighted information. So there's a lot of concern about copyright and the implications for copyright for all the data that's been pulled in. Copyrighted books, copyrighted, anything, designs, architecture, all kinds of stuff has been pulled into these as data. And the companies say, well, it's not a copyright violation because we transform it, right? So really interesting stuff coming out of the copyright world right now around just a case this past week around that. So some interesting stuff there. Large language models are usually the most common version of generative AI you'll see. Those are the text-based models primarily, so ChatGPT, Gemini, and so forth. So large language models produce human-sounding text, so it sounds very human when you interact with these tools. And I put some words here through next token prediction and reinforcement learning. You don't need to know what those are. If you have an interest, I put them there just in case if you're like, ooh, I want to know more. There's some terms you can go Google, okay? So next token prediction and reinforcement learning basically just mean it's trying to predict how the next word in a response that's going to be the next best word for you in response to your question. Yes?
Are you going, it's perhaps my age, but I am so frustrated with Verizon, Comcast, insurance companies. They all use AI, and it takes me hours to get through their damn mess to get to somebody who can help.
Yep.
I think this is a disaster.
Yeah. So we can talk a little bit about some of those impacts for sure. When I get to the impact section, I think one of the challenges that we'll talk about with these tools is that we often don't get to make a choice about when these tools are applied to us and what opportunities we have to get out of them, especially when they create lots of loops for us, right? So our agency, I think, is a really important piece of this. What do we have agency in, and how does that show up? And there's not a ton, if I'm being honest. There's not a ton of agency. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we need to be engaged with this, because we need to demand that agency. So let's see, it can be, so when these tools, they produce human sounding text, but it's not always accurate, right? To your point about talking to chatbots, They just put strings of words together that seem human sounding and seem appropriate, but they may not be accurate. And there's hilarious examples of that we can point to, but it can be difficult if you're not an expert in the thing that's being produced. It can be difficult to know if what's being produced by these tools is accurate or not. So if I ask it, give me the answer to this very complex algebraic question, and if I don't know how to do algebra, I cannot assess whether or not this tool gave me the right answer, right? So that's one of the challenges. It couldn't just make it up because these are not actually very good at math. And so that's a real challenge, especially in the educational context.
Trusting this thing?
We should not trust these things very much. It's not just text, so generative AI can also generate images, code, so if people code, like write code, these tools can generate code, presentations, sound, and more. I'll show you some examples here in a moment. It can create data, it can analyze data, and create data visualizations as well. The major players of these technologies are ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, which is basically just ChatGPT with Microsoft making it worse. Claude, sorry, this is being filmed too. I should be careful. Claude, which is by a company called Anthropic. Meta, which is the AI for Facebook. Meta's the head company, and then Google Gemini. So those are some of the key players in this space. China just recently released their own as well. It's called DeepSeek. It's created quite a storm, and there's all kinds of interesting issues that we'll talk about here in a moment with that. But there are also thousands of open source generative AI models as well. So if you go to a website called Hugging Face, I don't know why you would go to a website called Hugging Face, but that is where you end up. There are lots of generative AI tools people have developed and made the code for that open and shared it. So there's lots of sharing of these tools as well. Let me read this because it's not showing up. This last one says, beyond general purpose models, so models like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, those are called general purpose models. They do general things. We're also seeing developments in more specialized models that presumably do a better job of using data to answer questions. So specialized models might be something like, rather than using ChatGPT to answer medical questions, there are medical schools out there creating medical school-specific large language models that answer questions from medical texts, right? Does that make sense? So those specialized models can purport to create more accuracy in these models. So I mentioned already a couple times, bias is a big problem in generative AI. Not just because the data that they are fed, that they use to create stuff, is biased, but also how they were trained initially is also, they were trained by, these technologies were trained, reinforced learning by humans, and so there's bias in there. Bias will be an ongoing issue. So I mentioned the DeepSeek, the Chinese model that just came out. If you ask, so for example, if you ask DeepSeek what happened in Tiananmen Square, it will say, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay? Because the data that was put into that model by the Chinese government ignores that particular piece of history, right? So there's lots of issues like that show up. We were using it here at the college one time in a workshop, and somebody was trying to get a generative AI tool to create some sex education support, and it refused to do it, right? I've got guardrails, I've got things that I won't be able to do, right? So even these tools have some different ways they handle data as well. Tools are driven by data, so even if you don't use them, they have data about you in them. And if you use them, the data from those uses is going to be part of their training, right? So they're constantly learning from us as we use them. I mentioned guardrails. Despite the guardrails that exist around these tools, humans find ways to use these in unethical ways. Are you shocked? So for example, for creating misinformation. really quickly. You can create misinformation very quickly. So that's a problem. Doxing, which is sharing people's personal information on the web. So people will use it for that. Creating recipes for weapons of mass destruction. So these are not great things. And so the guardrails, oh, and as I said, the guardrails embody particular viewpoints of companies and countries as well. For example, DeepSeek won't talk about Tiananmen Square. So there's some real issues around accuracy, around data, around how this information is used, how accurate is this information. So some real problems with what these tools produce. And here at the college in particular, in educational institutions, one of the big questions is, okay, can we tell if something's been AI generated? Are we able to kind of suss out, if a student wrote a paper using generative AI? And by and large, the answer is no. There are lots of ways these technologies can fool us into seeming very human. There are lots of ways that people can use these technologies to create things that sound very human, right? And there are these technologies called AI detection tools that don't work. They're not effective. And in fact, they often lead to false flags. They tend to flag, say, English language learners. They tend to flag people whose discourse sounds less academic, right? So there's some real issues with trying to detect what is AI generated or not. And by and large, New York Times a few months ago now did a piece where they said, can you identify AI generated images? Did anyone see this? It was like a quiz. Oh, everybody failed. It was, I think I scored 30%. And be able to detect what was a human image and what was an AI generated image. It's just very difficult. These things produce very human-like kinds of things, and they're getting better, right? So it used to be you could count on an AI generated image like having 6 fingers or something, but that's not the case anymore. They don't, not as much. So that's something to be aware of as well. The last point here it says is prompting is an important part of interacting with generative AI tools. So you might hear the term prompting or prompt engineering as a term of something that people do when they are interacting with AI. What that means is basically talking to the AI to get the output that you want. So typically when we've done like computer stuff, we say, give me this, or you click on something, like I want this, and it gives it to you, and if it doesn't give it to you, you go, okay, now what? With generative AI, the way we talk about it, it's not, you can't see it here, but on the last line it says is, it's computing through conversation. The best way to get good stuff out of generative AI is to talk to it, and to keep talking to it, and keep saying like, okay, I didn't like this, do this differently. Which is really different than how we've typically done computing. So that's a part of this that's really interesting, is to actually make good things come out of these tools, you have to actually kind of interact with them, which feels really weird, right? Okay. All right. I won't go over all of these. I did want to mention that obviously generative AI has been out for a few years now, a couple of years, and so I think a lot of us at least kind of know of it. And know some of the things. Maybe we've seen a funny story about generative AI creating something silly, like a picture with 6 fingers, or that kind of thing, right? But there's a lot of developments that have happened over the last 2 years that if you're interested in digging in a little bit more, I wanted to make sure you had some places to dig in a little bit more. I'm just going to briefly highlight some things here, but we won't spend too much time on these topics. I will make sure you get these slides, and there's lots and lots of clickable links in here that we're not going to click today, but you can go and click to your heart's content, okay? So, I mentioned earlier agentic behavior. Lots of these technologies are starting to become set up for agency, to kind of be able to do things on their own. I didn't actually test this volume, so this may not work, but here's an example.
I'm Pooja, and I'm a researcher at Anthropic.
It says Claude is generating all the actions shown
I'm going to
here.
show you a simple example of computer use today. My friend's coming to San Francisco next week, and I want to take him to do some touristy stuff. I think doing a sunrise hike with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge never gets old. So I'll ask Claude to figure out some logistics for us. I'll ask Claude to find a good place to see the sunrise, to help me figure out timing logistics, and help drop a calendar invite so I remember when I have to leave. It's opening Chrome, going to Google, searching,
So it's doing all this without her. She just told it, here's what I want. It's Googling things.
It looks like it's found something.
It's scheduling things.
Great.
It's putting things on
So
her
how far
calendar.
away is the location from my place? It's opening maps,
It's mapping things, all without her. She just told it what she wants.
searching for the distance between my area and the hiking location.
All right, so I wanted to show that really briefly. You can, of course, watch the entire video at some point if you would like, just to show that that's one of the developments that I think actually is really important to know about, is that these tools are becoming able to do a lot more things without our interference, which is, I would say, a concern, right? Because these are already kind of black boxes. It's hard to know what they're doing, how they're generating things, and so forth. And then you add a layer of and now they're doing it on their own without any input from us, becomes a little bit of a concern, right? So that is, I think, an important development that you should know about. In addition to, we're seeing, these tools become bigger, more data, more performance, more ability to remember past conversations. So one of the limitations, for example, of large language models has been you can be talking to it for a while and doing a bunch of stuff, and then halfway through the conversation, it's like, oh, I ran out of memory, our conversation is done, and that's it. And that's the end of the conversation. But computing power is really growing for these things, and they're able to have longer conversations with you, remember things across conversations. So there's some developments like that that are worth knowing about. You don't necessarily have to use chat to interact with them. There are different ways, like voice and video are now ways that are able to be interacted, and lots of integrations everywhere. So we talked a little bit about your email systems and your cars, right? These are gonna have AI integrations if they don't already. So again, lots of stuff to click if you're interested, but I wanna move on a little bit to thinking about some of the, obviously, seeing your faces, I can tell you have concerns. Let me add to those a little bit. How's that? One of the challenges with the hype around AI is we get focused on things like, wow, it can make things. Wow, it can create realistic images. Wow, someday it's going to be AGI, artificial general intelligence. It's going to be smarter than humans. Wow, those are some of the stories that get told. Meanwhile, under the surface, we're working with things like, whoa, there's a lot of biases and hallucinations, which is the term we use for when they make up stuff. Wow, propaganda and deception could be built in these technologies. Oh, by the way, these technologies use a ton of natural resources, clean water, extracting minerals from our Earth. Lots of carbon emissions, which is true of all technologies, not just AI, so that's just something to know is technology in general is a very extractive and resource-intensive of our natural resources. Exploitation of underpaid workers, right? So a lot of stuff under the surface that gets obscured by these really exciting narratives about what these technologies can do. And so I think it is important for us to, as we look at what the potential opportunities are for these technologies, and as stories get told about how awesome these technologies are out in the world, that we're able to bring the lens of, okay, what does that mean for privacy? What does that mean for, bias? What does that mean for our Earth? Right? There's some real big implications there. If you're interested in diving in a little bit more to that, I do recommend this book right here. It's Atlas of AI. It's a book by Kate Crawford. And what I love about it is she starts the book talking about all the ways in which AI infrastructure is physical, right? Everything that AI we think of as AI, like digital and out in the cloud and on our phones, it's all, it's our Earth. It's water, it's minerals, it's space, it's carbon, right? It's all those things. She dives into it. It's a fantastic book, and really goes through a lot of those aspects of AI that don't always get told in the stories. All right, so how do we deal with this? Well, here's a set of ideas that we like to share with our class. So I teach a class here at Middlebury called Questioning Technology. which I love to do. And questioning technology, it's interesting. Teaching young people this class, one of the things that I've had to learn over the last few years is many of the students in our class have never had the opportunity or even been expected or asked to question the technology in their lives. It comes natural to us because it's fairly new to us in the sense of our lives. We had a lot of it, a lot of our life before these technologies arrived. But for these younger people in college, this has been in their lives, the entirety of their lives. And there hasn't been space or even support for really questioning it. So we teach a class called Questioning Technology, and we base it on several texts, including this Atlas of AI book is one of the texts. And also this 1998 talk given by Neil Postman. So it's an article based on the talk that he gave. But we think these are actually really important points for any technological change. And we think that these are helpful as we go into looking at AI and its impacts, is to think a little bit about how these ideas play out from Neil Postman. So he says, we always pay a price for technology. The greater the technology, the greater the price. Now, when I think about that in terms of AI, I think, oh God, right? Because all that I've described up to this point is AI is in a lot of places, it's becoming ubiquitous, it's very difficult to resist, it's not always accountable, right? So that's a big concern. What are the prices we are paying for this technology, right? That's a key part of navigating this moment. There are always winners and losers, and the winners always try to persuade the losers that they're really the winners. When I think about winners here, I think about those Silicon Valley folks who own these companies, who make billions, who also now run our government, and who they try to convince are winners in this situation, but are not, right? So it's a really apropos moment to ask that question. There is embedded in every great technology an epistemological, political, I would say, and social prejudice. And asking questions about what's behind this. If we believe that this is automating something, human decision-making, human creation, human agency, if we're automating those things, what is that saying about what we believe about human agency? What does it say we believe about human decision-making? It says something, right? Technological change is not additive, it's ecological, which means it changes everything and is therefore too important to be left entirely in the hands of Elon Musk. I'm sorry, Bill Gates. Did I say Elon Musk? I must have meant, this was 1998. Right. But you could easily put in Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk and say, actually, no, this is too important to be in the hands of those folks alone with very little accountability. Technology tends to become mythic, and I think this is really true for AI. Boy, have we created a whoa ethos around Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. We've mythologized them, and the technology. We herald AI as transforming all of these things. But that really, makes us feel like the technology is inevitable, it's unchangeable, it's immutable, and it's outside of our control. And it gives that technology more control of our lives than is good for us. So when we start to think about how do we think about these technologies, I think these are really important and helpful ways to frame our thinking. In what ways are we paying a price? What trade-offs? The word we use in our class is trade-offs. What trade-offs do we make? Who are the winners and who are the losers? And what are the losers being told about the fact that they're losing, but they're being told that they're winning? What are the epistemological, political, and social prejudices behind this technology? Who is accountable? I think is number 4 to me. Who is accountable? And how do we think about it in terms of the ecological nature of these technologies, that they're part of many aspects of our lives? And how do we demystify? How do we make this less mythical and more accountable to us as humans? All right, so here's my good rule of thumb. Be wary of any claims that AI is going to transform something. Just be very wary of that. And here's why. While these tools are capable of remarkable tasks, and we're about to look at some examples, Claims of transformation are usually anchored in a devaluing
Yes.
as inefficient of humans, as inefficient, ineffective, and inconsistent. And there's related social dynamics such as care and common good. And some of those things that sometimes we accept inefficiency because it's about caring, right? But these technologies that's not their value, right? So when we start talking about claims of transformation, it's usually devaluing humans as inefficient, ineffective, inconsistent, and their related social dynamics, and overestimating the capabilities of these tools. Now, this is a personal view. I think I personally live by this. I think it's okay to think of these tools as impressive, as having some capabilities that are like, whoa, that's impressive. I've never experienced something that could do that. Right? I think it's okay to say that. I think it's okay to recognize there's some interesting stuff that these tools are doing, and also simultaneously, we can ask, what are the trade-offs that we make when we accept that tool? Even if it's impressive, even if it's doing something that's like, wow, what are the trade-offs? And we're trading off some of the things that we really care about for these efficiencies and these automations. All right, still with me? Okay, let's look at some examples. So in terms of thinking about how these tools might be considered impressive, I wanted to show some examples of some things that these tools can do, just for you to get a sense of them, and we can talk a little bit more as we go. But in general, I would say this is a pretty decent list of things that these tools can do fairly well. And I will say that fairly well, and I'll even add an ish on there, like fairly well-ish, because it's inconsistent and it's hard to assess, right? So I'm going to say ish, but sometimes they do pretty well. So writing tasks, reading and synthesizing information, which I'll show examples of all of these, creating images, video, and music, having a conversation, restructuring information, providing multiple formats for learning and visualizing information, locating resources and research, and coding. All right? So let's take a couple examples. Writing tasks. Oops. Okay. So this is Claude. I said to Claude, hey, I'm giving a talk to the local chapter of the AAUW. And here's a description of the talk, and I pasted in the description of the talk for today. And I said my slides for the talk, I had an earlier version of the slides. My slides for the talk are attached, so you can see they're attached up there. Okay. Can you create a one-page summary of the talk? So writing task, right? All right, so demystifying, here's the overview. Okay, 3 types of AI discussed. We've done that, yes. Good, so far so good. Okay, key insights. Yeah, not bad, not bad. Okay, okay. Critical considerations drawn from Postman's framework. By the way, it did this in about 10 seconds, right? Okay. Impacts on education, we're going to get to that in a moment. So you're getting a little preview now of what's coming. Recommended approach, okay. All right, not bad. Now, that did a good job of creating basically an outline of the talk based on my slides and the description, right? So I said, okay, now write a one-page summary. Remember, computing through conversation, right? It didn't give me exactly what I wanted. I wanted like a summary, not an outline. So I said, now we'll write a one-page summary that an AAUW member could share on their website or their blog. I don't know if you have a blog, but just in cases. In a timely and illuminating presentation, thank you. A thoughtful framework for understanding artificial intelligence and its impacts on our lives and society. Dr. Collier emphasized that while AI technologies are increasingly embedded in our digital world, from search engines to social media and everyday applications, we can approach them with both curiosity and it's not bad, right? And again, a lot of times when we talk about computing through conversation, I could say, okay, fix that second paragraph, its tone is weird or something, right? Or write a shorter version, write a longer version, right? I can compute through conversation with this and get even better product. I could take this and make some edits myself, right? So as a writing task, not bad. Would I turn this in as an essay for a paper? No. But, you know, for writing blog posts on our website, I would at least probably start there, maybe, considering. All right, here's another example. Actually, let me, yeah. I talked about how it can summarize information. So please review the attached PDF, it's just an article, and provide a summary of the key points of the article, include some potential discussion topics for a college level class. Right, so it read the article, okay? Gave me an overview, key findings, potential discussion topics. Okay. So again, well-ish, right? I mean, obviously I may not use this exactly, but I taught in this questioning technology class, I would occasionally, typically when we teach this class, we have maybe 18 students. We had 38 students this semester. It was a lot. Which meant that our typical patterns of class discussion totally fell apart. So we needed some other ways of doing class discussion. Claude helped me with that. We'd be like, okay, here's what we wanted to do, but we have 38 students. How do we do that? Right, so it can produce some of these recommendations. Here's one I really like, actually. This is one that I love. In our questioning technology class, we often write on the board. We have like whiteboards all around the room. So what do you do with that, right? You could like take a picture or sit there and transcribe it. I just took a picture, uploaded the pictures with all the terrible handwriting of these students. No offense. And I said, I'm going to share a picture of the whiteboards from the class I taught today. Can you transcribe the writing on the whiteboard into notes that I can add to our shared class notes-taking document? Okay? So again, you can be impressed by these capabilities and still go, oh, God, right? It's okay. All right, here's another example. This is a tool. So right now I've shown you Claude, and I've shown you ChatGPT. That was the article summary. I'm going to show you a tool called Notebook LM, which is a part of the Google suite. So Google has an AI tool called Gemini, and then it has this thing called Notebook LM. What Notebook LM allows you to do is to upload your sources. So rather than going out into the big data source, right, going out everywhere, you can tell it what your data sources are. You can make a specialized model, like we talked about before, like when medical schools could do this. My husband works for Stanford School of Medicine. They're doing a pilot where they're putting in a bunch of medical curriculum into one of these on the left there, and then creating a chat that will allow the students to interact with that source material, right? So it becomes, the chat is here, but it's pulling from specific curated sources. Okay? You're determining what the source is, exactly. So this is from a class here at Middlebury, graph theory class. We worked with the professor, put a bunch of resources related to graph theory, and then this is just automatically there. We didn't have to create any of this, it's just there. You put the documents in, it does it. Here's the crazy thing. Let's see if I can find it. Automatically, without us even having to ask, this tool, Notebook LM, reads through all of these sources and creates a podcast. Listen to this. It might take a moment. Okay, while it's loading. Oh, there we go.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yes.
Today, we're going to be tackling something that, sounds really complex, but is actually all around us.
Mm-hmm.
Graph theory.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from textbooks, academic papers, all sorts of things to help us really understand the basics.
This is automatically
The
created.
thing is, once you get those basics, you really start to see graphs everywhere. Yeah, like from social networks to how your GPS figures
AI-generated voices, not human, automatically created. Here's the creepiest part. They make breathing sounds. They go, right? You can call into the show. You can actually call into it and they will respond to you. So again, the capabilities here are pretty mind-blowing, right? Scary.
I think it's time for me to die.
So those are all examples of how these technologies can write and read and synthesize information. I can show you examples of creating images. Oh, might need to log back in. I'll come back to that. Creating video. So this is a video I created. I just told it, give me an image of a dog catching a flying treat. A golden retriever Irish setter, which is the kind of dog I have, catches a treat while sitting in the kitchen. And it created this. Okay? Again, in a matter of seconds. And it can create images just as easily. Again, it didn't load. Having conversations. Where did my phone go?
Scary.
I will have to, just a moment. See my phone. I should have been prepared for this. All right, ChatGPT on my phone. I'm sorry, I have to sign in. Apparently I've signed out of everything.
And remember the password.
I know, wouldn't that be funny? Little password, come on. Let's go. Oh my God, okay, this may not work. If I were to demo this for you, what you would see is, I'm a Portuguese speaker, I speak Portuguese. I've said to it before, hey ChatGPT, I'm gonna speak to you only in Portuguese. Only respond to me in Portuguese. And we're gonna have a conversation as if I was your best friend talking about your day. And it could do that in Portuguese. Okay? So, conversation partners, does a pretty good job. If you wanna see more capabilities, I'll log in at some point and show you. Here's an example, oops, not that. Restructuring information. So here's an example, this is on ChatGPT. My colleague, Tom, who works with me here at Middlebury on a lot of this stuff, he's wonderful. He took an email that we received here at Middlebury. Do you ever get these long emails that's like, look at all the great things happening, and you're like, that's so much information, what do I do with it? So he took the email, dear colleagues, we seek proposals, and then here's blah, 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 and then here's this other update, and then here are all these workshops. Look at this email, y'all. Oh my gosh, right? So he took this email and he said, hey, ChatGPT, take the following information and create a table with the column for the title, event date, description, and link. Okay, so it took all that information, found the relevant dates, and created a table.
Whoa.
Right, so that's a restructuring of information. It took information and it restructured it in a more readable format. Similarly, we were talking before the session today about the MCTV. It's MCTV, right? Yeah, MCTV. Using this technologies to generate captions and accessible transcripts and things like that. Again, taking data in one format and turning it into another format. From that perspective, the accessibility side of it, awesome, right? And again, here, you take an email that you're like, oh God, who has time to read this, but I need some really important information out of it. And there it is, right? So again, it's okay to be impressed by some of these functionalities and also very concerned, right? I'm gonna keep normalizing that for you. Here's an example of creating an interactive concept map. So I uploaded a chapter from this book that we use in our class and just said, create an interactive concept map of the attached chapter. Let's copy the link, let's open it up. So, created a concept map just like that. It's not really interactive. I could make it interactive pretty easily, again, computing through conversation. Let's see, what else? We did that one, structure information. I can show you, here's a music example. My colleague Tom asked for, I don't see where the actual thing is, but I think this is Old English, a rap in Old English. Again, created with just a prompt, right? So, just to give you some examples, All right. So since we're about out of time, here's what I'm going to show you just really quickly. I mentioned to you, I put a ton of content in here. And not because I thought we could cover it all, because there's no way. Like I said, I could talk to you all night, and you would be very sleepy and probably bored at some point. But I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to dig into things that you're interested in. So if there are areas of impact that you're really interested in, I provided some examples for you to click into. So here are also some of the places where we're seeing impacts hit. Labor, there's lots of talk about how this is going to eliminate tons of jobs. These tools are going to eliminate tons of jobs. We're already seeing these tools being used in the hiring process. So labor majorly impacted. Government, my God, the developments that are happening over the last few weeks on this, I can't even talk about because they hurt my belly. Education, I'm gonna stick with education here in a moment, so we'll come back to that. Finance. Really interesting stuff around like agentic finance AI, like AI that goes out and buys stocks and sells stocks on its own without any human, right? So some interesting stuff there. Obviously the environment, if you want to dig into that. Personal and home life, we're seeing a lot of developments in personal AI that helps you manage your life and runs your home for you and schedules all your meetings for you, right? So we're seeing some of that come in. It started with the Alexas and all the devices that came into our house, but that's amplifying even more. Misinformation, there's some really interesting stuff on that. I put a TED Talk in there that I find really worth watching. Global security, social media relationships. This is one I think, especially if you have grandkids or younger people in your life you care about who use social media pretty regularly, it might be worth to click on some of these and look at some of the ways these tools are showing up in social media. For example, if you log into Instagram, which many of the younger people are on Instagram, Snapchat is another tool that's doing this, there are now AI characters on those tools that young people can interact with as if they were human, right? So you take all the kind of issues with social media, and then you add non-human actors that are not accountable, that are not monitored, and that kind of thing. You can see some real issues emerging there. So I provided some examples. Again, this may not be relevant for you, but if you have people in your life who do use social media, or especially young people, like I've been thinking about, I have a 16-year-old, so God help me. This is something to know about, that these tools are showing up in social media in some pretty interesting ways, problematic ways, I think. Inequity and bias, and privacy and data exploitations, I think. There's some really interesting stuff to dig into. So again, lots of examples. We don't have time to get into all of them, but I want to make sure to show you places you could dig in and read a little bit more, okay? So that's available to you going forward. I just want to really quickly, but for about like 5 minutes, talk to you a little bit about some of the things we've been thinking about here at Middlebury. Obviously, these tools have big implications for what we do in the classroom, right? Some of the things you saw, being able to write, synthesize information, reorganize information, visualize, make sense of things. All of that is stuff we ask students to do in the classroom, right? To show us that they're learning, right? So we have a real concern here about how these tools show up in our classroom. It's not like we can stop it, right? It's not like banning AI at Middlebury is going to work. So what do we do about it? So we've been thinking a lot about this. We're really working on this as an institution, faculty, staff, students, all talking to each other about these issues. And I want to mention that we see these AI tools as shaping how students learn, right? And I want to point to, I was talking to some friends at the Learning Support Center we have here that support students who are maybe struggling a little bit academically, who said, actually these tools for students who have trouble reading, these tools can actually be really helpful as part of the reading strategy. If a student gets to a piece of text and starts to read and can make no sense of it, struggles, gives up, takes nothing away, then we've lost. But if this AI tool could actually help our students approach the reading with a sense of how they're going to do it, make some sense ahead of the reading, and then use that to then read, could that be a good thing? Maybe, right? I think that's, again, lots of hypotheses, lots of questions. But we do think that these tools are already and will continue to intersect with how students learn. Obviously, they will intersect with what students learn. The fields our students are going into, greatly impacted by these technologies. They're gonna need to learn about AI in order to be prepared for this world. And so that's definitely a piece of it. It's also gonna shape how we understand student learning. We used to be able to maybe assign an essay and believe that it told us something about what students knew. And that might not be true, right? We may have been fooling ourselves for a while about this. Don't get me wrong, right? Not all of our assessment techniques of the past were great. Okay? But this becomes even harder. How do we know what a student has learned? How do we know how prepared a student is for the things they're going to encounter in their lives, the person they want to be? How do we know that? That is a big question that we are confronted right now here in higher education. We have no answers. We have some explorations. We've been experimenting. But there's a lot, assessment is a really key kind of question for us in higher education right now. And faculty work. Think about, I gave the example of how my colleague and I who teach this class use these technologies to help develop some in-class activities, right? That changed my work, right? I think for the better, but also I need to sit down and think about those trade-offs a little bit. Where is my time best spent? What does it mean to be focused on research as a faculty member? What does that look like in this world? There's some big questions that come up. So those are some of the things that are impacts in education. And how these kind of shape up in the future, big question, right? Not everybody shares the same view of what the future looks like for education. We certainly see folks saying this will increase access for students who have struggled or had little access to higher education, especially certain kinds of education. And at the same time, we know that these tools can exacerbate inequalities. We've seen it, right? So both of those things can be true. The question is, how do we get to the future we want, right? These tools could potentially help students with deeper learning, but they could also help students create cognitive shortcuts, right? Both are possible and both are likely true. How do we get to the future that we want? Creation of new knowledge, right? That is a big part of how we see ourselves as academics. Could these tools be part of helping to create new knowledge? Maybe. Could they create a situation where we're just constantly regurgitating the same stuff out of the same tools? Also possible. What is the future we want and how do we get to it? Again, this is the theme I'm going to keep putting. There are lots of different ways this could go. How do we get to the future that we want? We see these tools as maybe providing some opportunity for deeper human connection. There's lots of busy work in academia. Could these tools get rid of that busy work and make opportunity for more human connections? Maybe. Could it also create less human connections? Yes, maybe. Right? So what is the future we want and how do we get to it? We want to know what students can do, right? So can these tools help us to better understand what students can do? Maybe. Is there a chance that these tools create less trust in what we know students know? Absolutely, right? What is the future we want and how do we get there? Those are the driving questions. And you can take those same questions and apply them to a number of domains that we talked about, labor, finance. You can, same kinds of questions. These different views of the future exist for all of those domains. The question is, how do we get to the future that we want? What is the best possible way forward? I will leave you on this quote. So I mentioned earlier before the talk, I was talking to some folks, and I mentioned that there was an AI summit just last week in Paris. You may have heard about it because our vice president said some really stupid things. Okay. It's recording. And in that same event were some incredible thinkers and leaders speaking about very carefully and considered ways of thinking about AI. There was a track at this AI summit focused on AI for public good. And this is one of the set of remarks that I took away from this event as I think one that we can use to guide our thinking going forward. She says, this is Dr. Alondra Nelson, she's a Harold F. Linder professor at the Institute for Advanced Study. She says, it's not inevitable that AI will lead to great public benefits.
That's right.
The outcomes many of us hope for or anticipate are not inherent features of the technology itself. They are not coded into the algorithms or embedded into neural networks. The good that may come from AI in science, in education, in healthcare, in the economy, must be actively stewarded through, I get goosebumps, through leadership and true innovation. Innovation that is fundamentally responsible and human-centered. These benefits will not emerge from the invisible hand of market dynamics. They must be cultivated in partnership with civil society and with our democratic institutions. And I believe Middlebury is one of those that has a responsibility to be engaged there. And most critically, AI in the public interest demands the meaningful involvement of the very people whose lives could be transformed by these technologies.
Amen.
Right? Oh, just goosebumps. So when I know it's very tempting to feel overwhelmed and frustrated by the hype, to look at these technologies and go, wow, they can do some incredible things, and oh God, the way they're being applied is terrible, right? Those things are absolutely natural responses. I feel them daily. And yet, I keep coming back to this idea that I cannot disengage from this. I feel morally and civically obligated to care, because if we leave this in the hands of Bill Gates, as Postman said, or Elon Musk, or Mark Zuckerberg, we are in trouble.
We are in trouble.
We are.
But I think we can do better. And that's the message of hope, I think, that we can take away from today. There's lots of problems. I hope that you will, this talk will help you think about those problems in a new light, consider them, dig into the resources, and take away the idea that our engagement is necessary in this. Otherwise, we are in bad trouble. All right? So I'm here as a partner in that engagement, doing my work here with Middlebury College. We're trying to do our best, and I wish you all the best, and a little time for questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
How do we, I'll speak for myself alone, I'm just a non-technological person. How can I possibly help and participate in this? What can I do?
Yeah, I think, I forgot there's one more slide. I'm going to pull it up just because this might be helpful. I think there can be a tendency for the stories about AI to really dominate conversations about AI. These hype stories, it's going to transform, right? And so I think one of the things you can do, even if you don't ever touch one of these technologies, is to bring the lens to these conversations around like, okay, what is this technology saying it's doing? Are we okay with that, right? What does this technology do? And what evidence supports its claims? What agency do I have, right? Some of these questions can help us like lead conversations away from, oh, this technology is super cool, to, right, to a better place, right? So I think that's a role that we can all play, is when these technologies, so for example, here at Middlebury, part of my job is to help think about how these technologies show up in our educational system, right? And so I'm going to bring these critical questions to every conversation, right? Similarly, I think, when you're talking to local government, are there applications of AI showing up in our local government? Policing is a great example of a drones. We just purchased some drones in town, right? That's all AI, right? So these are some of the questions you can take to local government and say, what are the trade-offs? What are we accepting? What are the privacy issues, right? So I think that is a way to engage with these things, is to have questions and critical lenses at your ready to be able to engage with how they show up in your lives. And I do think, again, if you have young people in your life that you care about, it's worth starting to think about how to help these young people navigate this world. Their parents, them, you, like whatever it is, I feel very concerned about our young people navigating this world right now. So those are just my ideas. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I was going to say, knowing how technology is so part of this younger generation, that I find it a divisive kind of thing, like, oh, you think of it as, you old folk kind of thing. But so keeping that balance, I mean, they're so much a part of social media, that is them.
Yeah.
And it's not us.
It divides us from
It
them.
divides us,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to be there, but keeping the human value, keeping, having them question. It makes me think about when my kids were little, learning critical analysis when they looked at ads.
Mm,
What is that gonna do
Yes.
for you? What do they want? Why are they getting them? I mean,
They
that's-
want your money.
They do, exactly.
Yeah.
The point is, can we get them to start doing that
Yeah.
in this day and age, which is overwhelming? That was just ads.
Mhm. It's a huge question. I think one of the great venues for that is education, right? I think our schools, again, if I'm sending you out into the world to make change, I'm sending all of you out in the world to make change.
You have a mission, guys.
Advocate in your local government for better decisions, more transparent decisions around AI in policing, in local government, and advocate for supporting your schools having AI and digital literacy support for your students, for the students. Young people need this information from age 4, 5. I mean, their faces are in iPads by age 4, right? So this education needs to be in schools. It needs to be critical education. And there are great organizations doing work out there to bring that. But as you all know, we are underfunding schools. We are under-supporting teachers in this work. So there's work to be done in thinking about what it looks like to have education play a role. Because you're right, it's difficult for you all to take that on, but you can support education.
I always want to ask, what is fact?
Well, that's what I was just about to ask.
Can you repeat that?
What is fact?
Go for it, Mary.
How will we decide or choose or see what is real and what is not? And I mean, I can think of some ways, but you know, how much time do you have to make that decision? Sometimes you need answers a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, there in our olden days, we could, find the answers more truthfully. But now, I feel like there's a lot of mistrust and definitely miscommunication and misuse.
Talking about AI
misuse.
fact checking.
Yeah.
Partly, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I think, to paint a little bit of a different light on the past, I mean, one of the challenges of the past is we took the best information, the most researched information, the best information out there coming out of scholarship and research, and we put it behind paywalls, and we made it inaccessible to the public. And so we already are fighting a battle around good information, right? We were already fighting before AI arrived and before social media arrived.
What do you mean by that? I don't think I
So for example, colleges and universities produce a ton of research that is intended to help us understand the world, pandemics, right? Lots of research being produced. Most of that research, the way it gets validated out of colleges and universities, is when professors publish it in journals that are behind paywalls.
That's right.
So it's not accessible to the broad public. It's not made visible and accessible. So it creates this gap in terms of good information out in the world. And social media fills that with crap, right?
Yes.
And that gets worse with AI slop, is what we call it, AI slop. So I mean, this is an issue of many generations already. It's getting worse with AI. There are some techniques that have been developed in the last few years. That's a whole nother talk I give on misinformation. But I have a colleague, Michael Caulfield, who has a technique he calls SIFT. So it stands for STOP, which is just to recognize that when you're being bombarded with information, it makes it harder for you to make an accurate assessment of the information. So STOP is the first aspect. Investigate the source is the I. So using good techniques for investigating the source, which we teach to students because we have some bad techniques for investigating the source also. Find other coverage is the F. So find other news organizations that are covering the same thing and try to validate. And then T is trace claims to original sources. So those 4 steps are what we teach, what I have been teaching to young people on misinformation. And by and large, those same techniques apply in this AI age as well. Now, we're going to keep having to evolve this because misinformation has a way of finding novel ways to misinform us, or the people behind it, I should say, have a way of finding novel ways to misinform us. But those are some strategies that we teach. And again, that TED Talk that I listed on that impacts page. Really good if you're interested in more about this information. There are lots of great organizations taking this on.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my daughter-in-law on my way over here. She's a 5th grade teacher. And she said that they are encouraged to use a lot of AI to get resources and to, materials for kids. And she said she has caught so many mistakes that she has contacted the AI company and says, did you know that you did this and this and it's supposed to be 100, but you had it going to a number 60 or whatever. So she said there's so many things that the teacher has to be so aware of what she's putting out in front of the kids.
Yeah.
The other thing that she noticed is that when she asks, like she was going to do some history program on an individual, she asked the AI to write something for a 5th grade level so that they could read it and then have a discussion in class. And she said there were so many inaccuracies in what were in that and prejudicial comments, etc. So she said, it wasn't particularly useful, but if she had been somebody who was just trying to quickly get her work done, get the day taken care of, it would have been misinformation those students had gotten.
That's right.
So
It is so important that we educate young people about that because she is an expert. She was able to look at it and assess. But we have, as you said, young people coming in and believing that these are truth machines, right? Not all, and we have lots of savvy students who are more savvy than many of us. But plenty of students who, and again, let's recognize the systemic issues. This isn't just about those students, right?
No.
It's also about the fact that we place a ton of pressure on young people, that education is underfunded and undersupported. Here at the college, we place very high demands on these students. They are stressed to the max, and there are lots of motivations for them to cut corners to succeed, because that's how they got here, right, is to really succeed. And so it's a systemic issue in addition to a personal issue. And I think that's right, that without the engagement with students on these very issues, it's just gonna cycle and get worse, because there's little reason not to use them given the context that these students are operating in.
I love the SIFT, and is there any way we could ask you to do a PS to your slides? Because it was really valuable.
Happy to. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope I did not overwhelm you. I hope there's lots of good information in here for you. And again, I will send these slides. I'll make sure to get contact information for all of you. Send slides. Click on everything. If you have questions, let me know. I'm here. I'm a member of your community. I'm the jazzercise instructor. So definitely feel free to ping me if you have questions. And let's make this world better, huh?
Thank you.